The valley was silent, too silent. Major Sarah Lawson crouched behind a jagged rock, her breath shallow, heartbeat pounding like a war drum in her chest. The sun beat down mercilessly on the rugged terrain of eastern Afghanistan, casting long shadows that hid danger in every crevice. She scanned the narrow pass ahead, knowing that Taliban fighters were waiting, ready to strike. For weeks, her unit had been tracking enemy movements, chasing whispers through the mountains. Now, trapped in this hostile valley, surrounded and outnumbered, survival felt like a distant hope. The crackle of static on her radio was the only sound besides the distant rattle of gunfire. "Major, this is command," the voice buzzed. "Close air support is inbound." "Hold tight," Sarah's jaw tightened. She had heard these promises before, air support arriving too late, too far away. But this time she had no choice but to believe. Her medic kit felt heavier than ever on her back, loaded with supplies she prayed would be enough to save her wounded men. A sudden explosion shattered the silence. Dust billowed from the far side of the valley, and gunfire erupted in a deafening roar. "Medic down! Medic down!" someone shouted nearby. Sarah pushed herself up, sprinting toward the cries despite the bullets zipping past her. Her training kicked in, every movement automatic. She reached Private Jensen, lying motionless with blood pooling beneath him. Checking his pulse, she saw it was faint but steady. "Hang on, Jensen," she whispered, pulling her bandages from her pack. Her fingers worked quickly, binding wounds, but chaos was closing in. The enemy fire intensified, pinning down her squad. Men shouted orders, trying to find cover, but the rocky valley offered little. Sarah glanced up at the sky, desperation creeping into her thoughts. She had seen so much death, too many friends lost on missions just like this. She didn't believe in miracles anymore. Not after what she'd witnessed, but then a low rumble broke through the noise, a sound unlike any other on this battlefield. The earth seemed to tremble beneath her feet. Sarah froze, looking up. A silver shape appeared on the horizon, slicing through the air with terrifying precision. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, had arrived. The massive warplane roared overhead, its GAU-8 Avenger cannon blazing fire that tore through the enemy positions. Tracers lit up the dusty sky and explosions erupted in a deadly symphony. Sarah shielded her eyes against the debris and smoke, heart pounding with a mixture of awe and disbelief. She watched as the pilot, flying low and steady, obliterated the ambush with surgical strikes. This wasn't just firepower. It was salvation. The Taliban fighters scattered, their fire faltering under the relentless assault. Sarah seized the moment, calling out orders, rallying her unit to move. "Medic teams, evac route clear. Move, move!" Soldiers scrambled toward the extraction point, wounded carried on stretchers, the roar of the A-10 still thunderous above them. Sarah's gaze caught a figure waving frantically from the cockpit. A woman. Captain Emily Grant. The pilot was a guardian angel in the sky, risking everything to save lives on the ground. Sarah's heart swelled with gratitude and something more, a fragile, flickering hope. As the A-10 pulled away, retreating into the clouds, Sarah helped lift the last of her wounded comrades. Exhaustion weighed on her, but so did a new belief. She had seen many things in war, sorrow, betrayal, sacrifice. But this day, she had witnessed a miracle, and for the first time in a long time, Major Sarah Lawson believed again. Major Sarah Lawson sat alone in the dimly lit tent, the weight of the day pressing down on her like the desert heat outside. She traced the lines of her worn dog tags, fingers trembling just slightly. This wasn't how she imagined her life in the military when she first enlisted. Back then, she had been full of hope, a young woman determined to make a difference, to save lives, to protect those who couldn't protect themselves. She thought back to her early days, the crisp sound of boots marching on the parade ground, the endless drills, the grueling medical training. Sarah had grown up in a military family. Her father, a retired general, was a strict man with a stern gaze and a proud posture. She remembered sitting at the dinner table as a child, listening to stories of valor and sacrifice. Her father had always expected her to follow the family tradition, but Sarah's path had taken a slightly different turn. She chose medicine over combat, believing healing was just as heroic as fighting. But war had a way of changing people. Her first deployment to Iraq was nothing like the training exercises. The bright colors of her world faded into the harsh reality of burning vehicles, screaming wounded, and the ever-present threat of death. She watched friends die sometimes, despite every effort she made. Those memories haunted her. The faces of those she couldn't save, the desperate calls for help, the silence that followed. After returning home briefly, Sarah had hoped for peace. But the war called her back, this time to Afghanistan, a land of rugged mountains and shifting alliances. She thought she had prepared herself for everything. Yet, every mission chipped away at her belief in miracles. Her daughter's face was the one she clung to during the darkest moments. Sarah carried a small photo in her pocket, a picture of her daughter's smile, framed by golden curls and bright eyes. That smile reminded her why she fought, why she stayed alive. But it also made the losses harder to bear. In quieter moments, she struggled with the question that many soldiers face. How much can one person carry before they break? How do you hold on to hope when surrounded by destruction? Sarah had pushed those questions deep down, hiding behind a mask of professionalism and determination. Her commanding officer once told her, "You're tougher than you think, Major, but even the strongest need to believe in something bigger than themselves." At the time, she had scoffed. Belief was a luxury for civilians. Soldiers survived on grit and training, not miracles. Tonight, though, everything felt different. The roar of the A-10 Thunderbolt II had shattered more than just enemy lines. It had pierced the armor around her heart. For the first time, Sarah allowed herself to feel the possibility of hope again. She thought about the pilot, Captain Emily Grant, a woman flying through hellfire to save lives on the ground. Sarah admired her courage, her skill, and the fierce determination shining through the grit and grime. Emily wasn't just a pilot. She was a guardian, a sister in arms who shared the same scars of loss and sacrifice. Sarah's mind drifted back to that moment in the valley. The way the A-10's massive cannon lit up the sky, shaking the earth beneath her feet. It was as if the plane carried with it a force beyond technology and tactics, something almost supernatural. The firepower was undeniable, but what struck her more was the sense of protection it offered, like a shield forged from steel and courage. Her thoughts were interrupted by the soft hum of voices outside. Fellow soldiers came back from patrol, weary but alive. Some limped, others bore fresh wounds. Each of them carried their own stories of survival and sorrow. Sarah stood, gathering her medical supplies. There would be no rest tonight. The battlefield never truly sleeps. She prepared her gear with methodical precision, but her mind was elsewhere, replaying the day's events, weighing the cost, counting the blessings. Every life saved was a victory, every loss a reminder of the war's brutal toll. Sarah's phone buzzed softly. A message from her daughter flashed on the screen. "Stay safe, Mom. We're proud of you." The words brought tears to her eyes. In a world consumed by violence, those simple words were a lifeline. As dawn approached, Sarah found herself on the ridge overlooking the valley. The rising sun painted the rocky landscape in hues of gold and crimson. The air was still, but the memory of gunfire and explosions lingered like a ghost. She whispered a silent vow to protect her team, to honor the fallen, and to never let go of the hope that the A-10 had reignited in her heart. For Major Sarah Lawson, the war was far from over, but now she carried with her a renewed belief that even in the darkest moments, miracles could still happen. The morning briefing room was tense, filled with the low murmur of voices and the rustle of maps being spread across tables. Major Sarah Lawson stood at the front, her eyes scanning the faces of her team, men and women who had become more like family than comrades. The mission ahead was simple on paper, but the reality was far more dangerous. They were to move through the narrow mountain pass, gather intelligence on Taliban activity, and extract safely before nightfall. Easy to say, impossible to guarantee. Sarah pointed to the satellite image projected on the screen. Jagged peaks surrounding a deep valley, the perfect place for an ambush. Every inch of that terrain had been studied, yet no amount of intel could erase the unknown dangers lurking in the shadows. She knew the enemy was clever, ruthless, and familiar with every rock and crevice. Her voice was steady but firm. "We move fast. We watch every step. Medics stay close. Cover each other. If things go south, extraction is 30 minutes out. We hold tight and call for KS." The acronyms came easily. Close air support, combat air patrol, terms drilled into their bones, but never taken lightly. The soldiers nodded. Checking gear, adjusting straps, and securing weapons. Boots hit the ground with a determined rhythm as they stepped outside into the harsh desert sun. Sarah's heart raced with anticipation. She had been through countless missions, but this one felt different, heavier, more urgent. As the unit descended into the valley, the landscape shifted from barren rocks to sparse patches of dry grass. The air was thick with dust and tension. Every sound was amplified. The crunch of gravel underfoot, the whisper of wind. Distant bird calls turned silent under the weight of impending danger. Sarah stayed alert, eyes flicking between her GPS device and the horizon. Suddenly, a sharp crack echoed from the far side of the valley, a single rifle shot. The unit froze. Every soldier instinctively took cover behind rocks and sparse vegetation. The shot was a warning, a message. The enemy was watching. "Contact front!" a voice shouted. Bullets began to hail down, tearing through the air with deadly precision. The valley erupted into chaos as Taliban fighters revealed themselves, firing from concealed positions. Sarah's training took over. "Medics, set up a triage point near that boulder," she ordered. "Suppressing fire, cover the wounded." Her team moved like clockwork despite the chaos. She sprinted toward a fallen soldier, Private Morales, whose leg was badly injured. Kneeling beside him, Sarah applied a tourniquet, her hands steady despite the danger. The firefight intensified. The enemy was well prepared, using the terrain to their advantage. Sarah's squad found themselves pinned down, the narrow valley leaving little room to maneuver. Communications crackled with urgent calls for reinforcements and air support. Minutes stretched like hours as the battle raged. Sarah's voice cut through the noise, coordinating movements, calming fears, and tending wounds. Around her, the faces of her comrades were etched with determination and fear. Each breath could be their last. Suddenly, the sound of engines roared in the distance. Sarah's heart leapt. Close air support was on its way. Through the haze and smoke, the unmistakable silhouette of an A-10 Thunderbolt II appeared, cutting through the sky with purpose. The plane dove low, its cannon unleashing a storm of fire upon the enemy. Dust and debris exploded around the Taliban positions as the A-10's precision strikes dismantled their defenses. The tide of battle shifted in an instant. "Move, now!" Sarah commanded, rallying her unit to evacuate the wounded while the pilot continued his devastating assault. Soldiers carried stretchers and helped the injured, the urgency driving them forward. Sarah glanced up at the plane, a surge of gratitude and awe flooding her chest. The A-10 was more than a weapon. It was a lifeline, a symbol of hope amid the carnage. As the squad retreated toward the extraction point, Sarah's mind raced. This mission had pushed them to the brink, but they were alive. For now, back at base, debriefings began. Maps were pored over, reports filed. The mole suspected within their ranks weighed heavily on everyone's minds. Trust was fragile, and betrayal even more dangerous than enemy fire. Sarah sat quietly, thinking about what lay ahead. The war was not just fought with bullets and bombs, but with secrets and shadows. Her resolve hardened. No matter the cost, she would protect her team. She would fight, not just for survival, but for the miracles waiting to be found in the darkest valleys. The first crack of gunfire echoed sharply through the valley, shattering the uneasy silence like a whip. Major Sarah Lawson's heart lurched as she dropped low behind a jagged boulder. Her squad was pinned down, surrounded by enemy fighters hiding in every shadow, their bullets cutting through the air with deadly precision. The mission, planned to be swift and surgical, had spiraled into chaos. Sarah's voice was steady but urgent over the radio. "Suppressing fire on my mark. Medics prepare for casualties. We need to hold this position, no matter what. Her fingers gripped the radio tightly, relaying orders as the firefight intensified. Every moment was a fight for survival. The valley walls echoed with the roar of rifles and the sharp crack of explosives, dust rising in choking clouds. Her eyes darted across the rocky landscape, searching for her wounded. Private Jensen lay motionless near a crag, blood seeping through his uniform. Sarah sprinted toward him, ignoring the bullets tearing at the air around her. She knelt, checking his pulse, faint but alive. "Stay with me, Jensen," she whispered, her hands working swiftly to staunch the bleeding. All around her, men and women fought desperately to hold the line. Shouts of pain, commands, and encouragement blended into a chaotic symphony of war. Sarah's squad was outnumbered, their cover minimal. The narrow valley that had seemed like a strategic advantage now felt like a trap, a cage tightening with every passing second. "Medic down!" a voice shouted. Sarah's heart skipped. She turned to see Corporal Davis clutching his arm, grimacing in pain. She rushed to him, adrenaline pushing aside the fear. "I've got you," she said firmly, applying a tourniquet with practiced speed. Minutes blurred together, punctuated by bursts of gunfire and explosions. Sarah's focus narrowed to the survival of her team. Every decision could mean the difference between life and death. Her breath came in quick gasps, sweat stinging her eyes as she moved from one injured soldier to the next. The radio crackled. "Major Lawson, we're losing ground." "You need backup now." The voice was strained but resolute. Sarah clenched her jaw. The extraction point was miles away, and reinforcements wouldn't arrive in time. Then, over the roar of battle, came a sound unlike any other, a deep, thunderous rumble that seemed to shake the very earth. Heads snapped upward as the unmistakable silhouette of an A-10 Thunderbolt II tore across the sky. The Warthog, a flying fortress armed with a 30mm GAU-8 Avenger cannon, was coming to their rescue. Sarah's breath caught. She watched in awe as the aircraft swooped low, unleashing a storm of fire on enemy positions. The valley erupted in a fury of explosions and dust clouds, the Taliban fighters scattering under the onslaught. The pilot's precision was devastating, every shot clearing a path for Sarah's squad. "Move! Move!" Sarah barked, rallying her team to evacuate the wounded while the A-10 continued its relentless assault. Soldiers hauled stretchers and helped the injured navigate the rocky terrain. The sky above was alive with the roar of the warplane, a guardian angel in steel and fire. As they retreated, Sarah's thoughts were a whirlwind. She knew the valley was not secure yet. The enemy was cunning and the fight far from over. But for the first time in a long while, she felt a flicker of hope. The A-10 had turned the tide, giving them a chance to live, to fight another day. Her gaze met that of Private Morales, who grimaced but managed a weak smile as he was carried past. They were battered, exhausted, but alive, and that meant everything. Back at the makeshift medical station, Sarah worked through the night, tending wounds, comforting those broken by battle. Her hands were steady, but inside, her mind replayed every moment, every bullet, every scream, every desperate call for help. She thought of the pilot, Captain Emily Grant, whose courage from the cockpit had saved them all. Sarah had never met her face to face, but already she felt a bond forged in fire and survival. They were warriors in different arenas, united by the same mission: protect, endure, and never surrender. Exhaustion pressed down on Sarah like a heavy blanket, but she refused to rest. Not yet. Not while her team still needed her. The valley was silent once more, but the echoes of battle lingered in her bones. In the quiet moments before dawn, Sarah allowed herself to hope. Maybe miracles weren't just stories told to comfort the broken. Maybe they were real, born from courage, sacrifice, and the unyielding spirit of those who refused to give up. The war was far from over. But so was her fight. The night was cold and silent, but inside the command tent, tension crackled like electricity. Major Sarah Lawson sat hunched over a rugged wooden table, maps and satellite images spread before her. The harsh glow of a single lamp cast deep shadows on her face. Her eyes, sharp and tired, scanned the terrain, The unforgiving mountains where her squad had narrowly escaped death just days before. They had barely caught their breath. The Taliban's grip tightened, and intelligence suggested a new threat brewing deeper in the valley. This time the stakes were higher. Sarah knew every mission carried risk, but the weight of responsibility pressed heavier than ever. Lives depended on her decisions. She reached for her radio, fingers steady despite the exhaustion. "Command, this is Major Lawson. We need reinforcements and air support ready for immediate deployment." Situation's deteriorating fast. The crackle of static was followed by a terse response. "Copy, Major. Assets en route. ETA 30 minutes. 30 minutes. Too long." Sarah's mind flashed back to the A-10 Thunderbolt II, the roaring protector that had saved her unit from annihilation. That steel beast had been a beacon in the darkness, its firepower precise and relentless. But she knew the pilot was risking everything each time she soared low over enemy lines. The image of Captain Emily Grant haunted her thoughts, a woman navigating death from the cockpit with fearless resolve. Sarah admired her courage, imagining the pilot's hands steady on the controls as explosions painted the valley below in flames. Her team was scattered but alive. Wounded men and women who had stared into the abyss and lived to tell the tale. Sarah's medic skills had been pushed to their limits, but tonight was different. She wasn't just tending wounds, she was preparing for the next battle. A sharp knock broke her reverie. Lieutenant Harris stepped inside, face grim. "Major, intelligence reports a large Taliban convoy moving through the Eastern Pass. They're planning a coordinated attack." Sarah's breath hitched. The Eastern Pass was a choke point. If the enemy took control, extraction routes would be cut off. She stood, voice cold and commanding. "We have to stop them. Gather your teams. We move at first light." The hours until dawn crawled by, filled with hurried preparations and whispered prayers. Sarah moved among her soldiers, offering brief words of encouragement. She saw fear in their eyes, but also something else, determination. As the sun began to rise, casting a pale glow over the jagged peaks, the squad set out. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of dust and anticipation. Every step was cautious, every sound amplified in the stillness. Sarah led from the front, eyes scanning the horizon. The convoy was close. She could hear the distant rumble of engines, the metallic clatter of supplies being loaded. The enemy was moving fast, confident in their strength. Then, suddenly, the valley erupted. Gunfire shattered the morning calm as Sarah's unit engaged the Taliban convoy. The battle was fierce and unrelenting. Bullets tore through the air, men shouted orders and pain. The narrow mountain paths left little room for maneuver, forcing close combat. Sarah fought beside her soldiers, adrenaline masking the ache in her muscles. She moved to help a young private caught in the open, dragging him behind cover as bullets whistled past. The clash seemed endless. Just when exhaustion threatened to consume them, a familiar roar thundered overhead. The A-10 returned. Captain Grant's arrival was a turning point. The warplane's guns unleashed a deadly barrage on enemy vehicles, crushing armor and scattering fighters. Sarah watched as the Warthog carved a path through the chaos, its pilot's steady hands delivering salvation once again. The squad seized the moment, pushing forward to overwhelm the stunned enemy. Minutes later, the valley fell silent except for heavy breathing and the distant echo of retreating fighters. Sarah's team regrouped, battered but victorious. As the adrenaline faded, reality set in. The cost was high. Wounded lay on stretchers, some silent in the grip of shock. Sarah knelt beside one of them, a young soldier with eyes wide but unseeing. "Stay with me," she whispered, her voice trembling. Later, back at base, Sarah stood alone by the flagpole, the morning sun casting long shadows. Her uniform was stained with dirt and sweat, but her posture was unbroken. She thought about the day's battle, the courage she had witnessed, and the sacrifices made. A soft breeze lifted the flag, a symbol of everything they fought for: freedom, hope, the promise of peace. Sarah allowed herself a moment to breathe, to feel the weight of it all. She knew the war was far from over. But in that moment, she also knew this: every act of bravery, every life saved, Every miracle witnessed from the skies below the thunderous roar of an A-10, it all mattered. Major Sarah Lawson was ready to fight on. For her team, for her country, and for the fragile hope that kept them all alive. The dust had barely settled over the rugged Afghan landscape when the news arrived. Captain Emily Grant, the A-10 pilot who had turned the tide in the last battle, was scheduled to visit the base. Major Sarah Lawson sat quietly in the briefing room, the hum of conversations filling the air around her. But her mind was focused on the woman who had saved her squad, a pilot she'd only known through radio calls and distant roars overhead. Emily was a legend among the troops. Her fearless flying had earned respect and admiration from ground forces and commanders alike. But Sarah knew there was more to Emily than just skill and courage. The bond between a soldier on the ground and a pilot in the sky was unique, a silent trust forged in the chaos of combat. When Emily finally walked into the tent, the room fell still. She was smaller than Sarah expected, lean, with sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a quiet confidence that spoke volumes. Her flight suit was streaked with dust and sweat, evidence of countless missions flown in hostile skies. "Major Lawson," Emily said, extending a hand. Her voice was steady but carried a hint of warmth. "It's good to finally meet you face to face." Sarah shook her hand firmly. "Likewise, Captain. Your flying saved my team more times than I can count." They talked long into the evening, sharing stories of their experiences. Emily described the split-second decisions made at 30,000 feet, the weight of responsibility for every life below. Sarah spoke of the battles fought on the ground, the fear, the pain, and the relentless will to survive. Their conversation revealed more than just strategy and tactics. It showed the human side of war, the sacrifices made not just by soldiers, but by those who guided them from afar. Emily spoke of nights spent staring at the stars, haunted by the faces of those she couldn't save, and the guilt that came with power. Sarah nodded, understanding all too well. "Sometimes it feels like we're just trying to hold on to hope in a world that's falling apart." Emily smiled faintly. "That's what keeps us going." The next day, Sarah and Emily stood side by side as the squad prepared for another mission. This time, the target was a hidden weapons cache deep in enemy territory, a strike that could cripple the Taliban's ability to wage war. The plan was precise, relying on the coordination between ground forces and air support that had become their lifeline. As the squad moved out, Sarah's heart pounded with a mix of fear and determination. The terrain was unforgiving. Steep cliffs, narrow passes, and the constant threat of ambush. Every step was a test of endurance and trust. When the enemy opened fire, Emily was already overhead, her A-10 slicing through the sky like a predator. Her guns roared, lighting up the landscape with bursts of fire that shattered enemy positions. The ground shook as missiles found their marks, clearing the way for Sarah's squad to advance. In the midst of battle, Sarah caught sight of Emily's plane. Circling low and steady, a guardian angel in metal and fire. The connection between them was unspoken, but powerful. A shared purpose that transcended the chaos around them. The mission was a success, but not without cost. Wounded were carried back to base, and Sarah once again found herself patching up bodies and spirits. The line between life and death felt thinner than ever. That night, as the camp settled into uneasy silence, Sarah reflected on what she had learned. War was not just about tactics or firepower. It was about human connections, the bravery of those who faced danger head-on, and the strength found in unity. Emily's presence had reminded her of the miracles she once doubted. The roar of the A-10 was more than noise. It was a promise that no soldier was ever truly alone. As dawn broke over the mountains, Sarah looked toward the sky, a renewed sense of purpose filling her heart. The battles ahead would be hard, but she was ready to face them, with courage, with hope, and with the knowledge that sometimes the most powerful weapon is belief. Major Sarah Lawson's story was far from over. But with allies like Captain Emily Grant soaring above, miracles were not just possible. They were inevitable. The radio buzzed urgently, slicing through the uneasy calm at the forward operating base. Major Sarah Lawson gripped the receiver tightly, her breath catching as the voice on the other end delivered news that sent a chill down her spine. An intelligence report had just come in. A high-value target was moving through the region, and the enemy's plan was more sinister than anyone had anticipated. They were preparing a large-scale assault that could devastate the base and cut off critical supply lines. Sarah's mind raced. Every operation, every decision she had made until now had been leading to this moment. She glanced around the room at her exhausted but resolute team. These were the faces she would fight for, the people who had become her family in this harsh and unforgiving land. "Listen up," she commanded, her voice slicing through the tension. "We've got one chance to stop this before it's too late. This mission won't be easy, but failure is not an option." Maps were spread across the table, satellite images projected on screens. The enemy was moving through narrow mountain passes, planning to strike under cover of darkness. The plan was to intercept and neutralize the threat before they reached the base. Sarah's eyes locked on a cluster of buildings nestled against the jagged cliffs. Intelligence suggested the convoy would pause there to regroup, making it the perfect place for an ambush. She knew the terrain well, the steep slopes, the rocky outcrops, a battleground where only the most skilled could survive. The squad geared up in silence, each soldier mentally preparing for what lay ahead. Sarah's gaze lingered on each of them, young faces hardened by war, their eyes reflecting fear, determination, and an unspoken trust in her leadership. As they moved out under the cover of night, the world around them was a landscape of shadows and whispers. Every sound was magnified, the snap of a twig, the distant howl of wind. Sarah's heart pounded, senses sharpened to razor edges. They reached the ambush point just as the convoy rolled in, headlights cutting through the darkness like daggers. Sarah signaled to hold position. The enemy was unaware, confident in their own strength. Suddenly, the silence exploded into violence. Gunfire shattered the night, tracer rounds weaving deadly patterns through the air. Sarah's squad sprang into action, returning fire with practiced precision. The narrow canyon echoed with shouts and explosions, a brutal symphony of war. Bullets zipped past Sarah as she led her team forward, taking cover behind rocks and debris. She spotted enemy fighters scrambling for better positions, their faces illuminated by the glow of burning vehicles. Amidst the chaos, Sarah's radio crackled. "Major, this is Captain Grant. A-10 inbound, ETA 2 minutes. "Hold tight!" Relief surged through her. The Warthog's arrival would tip the scales. The battle raged on, brutal and relentless. Sarah moved like a force of nature, directing fire, helping the wounded, pushing her squad beyond exhaustion. Every decision was a gamble, but she trusted her instincts and the unbreakable bond with her soldiers. Then, slicing through the roar of gunfire, came the unmistakable drone of the A-10. The sky lit up as the aircraft swooped low, its massive cannon unleashing a hailstorm of destruction on enemy positions. Explosions rocked the canyon, scattering fighters and breaking the enemy's momentum. Sarah felt a surge of hope. The battle was far from over, but the tide had turned. As the enemy retreated, Sarah's squad moved swiftly to secure the area. Wounded were gathered, weapons checked, and plans made for the next phase. The mission had been a success, but at a heavy cost. Sarah knelt beside a fallen comrade, the weight of loss pressing down like a stone. She placed a hand on his shoulder, whispering a promise she knew she had to keep, that their sacrifice would not be forgotten. Back at base, the aftermath was quiet but heavy. Reports were filed, wounds tended, and weary soldiers sought solace in brief moments of rest. Sarah stood alone under the stars, her mind replaying the day's events. The fear, the courage, and the fierce will to survive. She thought about Captain Grant, soaring high above, watching over them like a guardian angel. Their fight was far from over, but together they were stronger. The war demanded everything: strength, sacrifice, and sometimes miracles. And Sarah Lawson was determined to keep believing in both. The sun dipped low behind the rugged mountains. casting long shadows over the base. Major Sarah Lawson stood silently near the flagpole, the weight of the recent battles etched into the lines of her face. The distant hum of helicopters and the chatter of soldiers echoed faintly, but in this moment, the world felt still, as if holding its breath. The mission was over, but the war was not. The scars ran deep, both visible and hidden. Sarah's thoughts drifted to the faces of those lost, comrades whose lives had been claimed by the unforgiving terrain and relentless enemy. She clenched her fists, the promise to honor them burning fiercely within her. A soft voice interrupted her reverie. "Major Lawson." She turned to see Captain Emily Grant approaching, her flight suit dust-streaked but posture unwavering. Emily's eyes held the same fierce determination that Sarah recognized in herself. "You did good out there," Emily said quietly. "We all did." Sarah nodded, grateful for the presence of the pilot who had become more than just a guardian from above, a symbol of hope and resilience. "We couldn't have done it without you." Emily smiled, but there was a shadow behind it. "Sometimes I wonder if it's enough, if we can ever truly make a difference." Sarah stepped closer, her voice steady. "Every life saved, every mission completed, that's more than enough. It's what keeps us going." They stood together, two warriors from different worlds united by the same fight. The bond between ground and sky had been forged in fire and blood, a testament to courage and sacrifice. The base's commander approached, signaling the start of a ceremony. Soldiers gathered, their faces a mix of relief, exhaustion, and pride. Awards would be given, medals presented for bravery and sacrifice. Sarah felt the eyes of her team on her as she stepped forward. She was not just their leader. She was their shield and their voice. When the commander spoke of valor and honor, Sarah thought of every soldier who had fought beside her, their strength, their fear, their humanity. The medal she received was heavy, its weight a tangible reminder of the cost of war. She accepted it with quiet dignity, not for herself, but for those who could not be there to receive their own. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Sarah and Emily walked together beneath the fading light. They talked of the future, of peace, of homecomings, and the fragile hope that one day the guns would fall silent. But for now, they were soldiers bound by duty, bound by the miracles they had seen, and the belief that even in the darkest moments, courage could light the way. As night settled over the mountains, Sarah looked up at the stars, her heart steady. The battles would continue, but so would the fight for hope. Major Sarah Lawson had seen miracles. And with every roar of the A-10 above, she believed in them again.